Okay, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for joining. Mashiach Decoded. Mashiach Decoded. The second semester, class number 5. The class this week is called Miracles. Will we one day live in a magical world of wonder? Before we begin, I'd want to thank the Werdiger family for sponsoring the Mashiach Decoded series, especially now, as Hashem should bench them. It's the last class that we're having before Rosh Hashanah. We'll have to figure out when the last one is going to be. Because of whatever, something happened, I missed one class, so we'll have to reschedule the last class. I want to bench the Werdiger family from Australia, Rabbi Shlomo Werdiger and his entire mishpacha with a good gebenched Yar, Shana Tova Mesuka, a year full of prosperity, nachas, and gesund, and only good things for you and your mishpacha. Okay. We learned and discussed in the earlier classes that the Rambam is very, very insistent that Moshiach's coming to the world is not a one of miracles. Moshiach's coming to the world, his ability, his reign, and his accomplishments are not miracles. Moshiach's, and the reason, as we explained it earlier, is from the halachic perspective of Maimonides, of Rambam, Moshiach's main objective is the implementation of the entire Torah and mitzvah observance in the world. And had Moshiach had one of his requirements to make miracles, means that the world as we know it is not receptacle to God's mitzvahs. It's not realistic in a natural world that it should be full of the Torah, the world should behave in accordance to God's will. That cannot be. Therefore, it cannot be a requirement for Mashiach to have to do miracles. That's why we learn two things. The Rambam is insistent both that Mashiach doesn't have to do miracles, and also that the world in the Mashiach era doesn't have to become a different world. It should be, the world will be a regular world. But if you remember in the earlier classes, we discussed that the Rambam is going to have to agree that at a certain point there is going to be big changes in the world. Because the Rambam agrees, and he's the one who we discussed in the earlier class, is the one who took the idea of resurrection, of Tchias HaMesim, and made it as the foundation of one of the 13 principles of Judaism. You can't get around it. Resurrection is a miracle, is one of the greatest miracle. So therefore, and Rambam insists very strongly, and as we spoke in the earlier class, there were those who who accused the Rambam as him being one of the people who don't believe in resurrection, because he said Mashiach doesn't have to resurrect the dead. So we explained in the earlier class, Rambam himself defends himself. We're not explaining. The Rambam himself made a whole letter called the Geras Tchias HaMesim. He says, I never said there won't be Tchias HaMesim. God forbid. I myself put it as one of the principles of the Ani Mamins, who made who codified the principles of faith. I did it, and I put that as one of the principles. Of course I believe in Tchias HaMesim. The only thing we were saying that Hashem's business is to do the resurrection. It's not Moshiach's. It's not, hold on, let me just make sure we're not going to be disturbed. It's not Moshiach's business to be the one that will bring about the resurrection of the dead. But the resurrection is going to happen at a certain time. But it's not connected to Bias HaMoshiach. The essential Bias HaMoshiach is a king will rise and will bring the Jewish people to observance, build the Beis HaMikdash, and bring back all the 613 commandments, and bring us all to Israel, to Eretz Yisrael. Now, of course, it's hard for us to imagine that happening in a natural way, but technically it could happen. I mean, hypothetically it could happen, that the Jewish people gain strength. Even today, for instance, with Israel having such an army and being so strong, I mean, it's hypothetically already conceivable that through natural means, what we might call, especially with the support that Israel has now from the United States, that hypothetically they should be able to build the Beis HaMikdash. You see, it's a possibility, especially if we have a figure who is so charismatic and like Moshiach. We can see that something like that should be possible. Now, we did, however, mention that just like the Rambam is forced to acknowledge that there will be Tchias HaMesim, there will be resurrection, that means that at a certain point, a very big miracle will occur. We said that and we discussed this earlier, that's from different Mamarei Chazal, where it does speak about fantastic miracles happening in the Mashiach era. Like what the sages say, that all the trees will bear fruit, even barren trees will suddenly bear fruit. So once we have established that Rambam is not opposed to the concept that one day a huge miracle will happen in terms of changing the nature of the world, it's very possible that many other things will happen that will be transformative of nature. But as we discussed in the earlier classes, that leads us to the idea that if you take everything that the sages have said and put it together and filter it through the mind of the Rambam, you will come to the conclusion that there has to be two stages, two eras. Stage number one of Bias HaMashiach is where it's more of a natural order. We don't have anything extraordinary that is changing the natural order. But then, after that, comes at a later time. Now, we did discuss, if you remember, a very important idea. We did discuss that it's possible that even according to Rambam, that Bias HaMashiach should immediately be stage two. If you remember, we discussed this, that it's possible that the coming of Mashiach itself will be in a miraculous way. Rambam is not saying that that can't be. Rambam is saying that it doesn't have to be, meaning minimal, basic. As we spoke earlier, there's Mashiach basic and Mashiach premium. It's possible that we will get immediately Mashiach premium. But as we discuss, and that depends on the merit of the Jewish people. If we merit, we will get a miraculous coming of Mashiach from the beginning. Now, even if we don't merit, and Bias HaMashiach is coming in a natural way, since we discussed in earlier classes, as a result of Moshiach coming to the world, and suddenly we have such an influx of Torah observance, of mitzvah observance, Torah study and mitzvah observance, which means that there is a tremendous, tremendous boost of divine flow into the cosmos and into the world. That itself will bring creation up to a higher state in which it can receive the miracles. And that's the reason why we said that either way, eventually, again, we don't have an exact time, but eventually the world will move to a state where the miracles will start to impact the world. So either it can happen immediately, or even if it doesn't happen immediately, it will happen as a result of the Torah and mitzvahs, which will make the Jewish people be meritorious. And after Mashiach comes, being that we don't have the Yetzer Hara, and we don't have the disturbances, so it will all be in a very inspired state. So therefore we will all do mitzvahs diligently, so we will all be meritorious for a greater revelation of Hashem, which is the time of the miracles. Now, I'd like to explain this second kufa of the time of Mashiach, not in regards to what the miracles will be. We spoke earlier, all trees bearing fruit, that's huge, the resurrection of the dead. Perhaps it's in the second stage when the lion or when the wolf and the lamb, when there won't be the predatory nature of animals will go away, and so on and so forth, and all animals will live in peace and in harmony. So these are a few things that the sages speak about, which are the content of the miracles. But let's not limit God. There might be many, 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 many more. But that's not really what we're interested in. We want to really understand it fundamentally. We want to understand the soul of it. What's the deeper reason for that change? Why would we enter into a miracle state of existence? And this is something that is, and the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, explains it in a beautiful, beautiful way. Not just beautiful. And he opens up our eyes to an appreciation of the purpose of creation, the purpose of existence. And when we understand and when we appreciate the purpose of creation, the purpose of the world, and the purpose of creation from this perspective, we will then understand why it is so fundamental that we will one day enter into a world of miracles. There's actually a pasuk. The pasuk says, Ki kasher hashamayim hachadoshim, the new heavens, v'ha'aretz hachadosha, and the new earth, asher ani oiseh, that I will make. That means that at a certain point, we will not see the heaven that we have now, we will see a new heaven. We will see a new earth. Does that mean that creation will be undone and we will have a new heaven and a new earth? No. But it is called the new heaven and the new earth. That means that heaven and earth will be unrecognizable. Why will it be unrecognizable? Well, the pasuk says, Asher ani oiseh, that I am the one that's making. And that's the idea. The idea is as follows. What sets the world and makes the world into a natural place, fixed by certain laws and regulatory and regulations, is the fact that the world is finite. Why is the world, and when we say finite, it means the world is essentially finite. That means that the world, that all of creation, and especially all the specifics of creation, are fixed. Everything has its nature, everything has its rules of operations, which define its existence. A stone has its features that makes the stone a stone. A plant has an additional power to grow and to vegetate, but yet that too is limited. An animal has its limitations. A human who is so much of a greater capacity of knowledge and emotion and so on and so forth, and communication primarily, and development, but yet there are limitations to the human as well, and so on and so forth. And even angels are fixed in what they're capable of and what they can't. That's the nature of a creation, because a creation has limitations. However, those limitations are only as long as the creation is a creation. But when we dig deeper, deeper, deeper into creation, to understand it fundamentally, we come to an understanding that the creation isn't really a creation. The creation is nothing more than an expression of God. And here is the real appreciation of what the miracle is when Mashiach will come. We're dealing with a complete metamorphosis in our appreciation of ourselves and the world around us. We will one day wake up in the morning and suddenly find ourselves experiencing ourselves as a continuum of God's flow, not as a being separated from God, which is a deeper truth that exists now, but that we're unaware of. So let's put it this way. When Hashem created the world, Rosh Hashanah is coming, and this week actually we're going to experience the birthday of the world, and we get back to the very beginning. What was God's intention in creation? What was his desire? So it says, it arose in God's desire, so it says in the Arizal, I want to be a king. The nature of being a king is, the idea of being a king is that he rules over his subjects. But there's a very, very important principle, and that is that the subjects can't be himself. If the subjects are himself, then there's no pleasure in being a king. You can't be a king over your toes. You don't get any satisfaction of your toes obeying you, and that should satiate or bring fulfillment to that quest of kingship. Doesn't work. They have to be separated. Even if you have a large family of 36 children, you can't be a king. First of all, you'll never be a king, but on them. But even if, hypothetically, they will all obey you all the time, you cannot be a king over them. It doesn't satisfy because your children are still too much you. The idea of kingship is that there is a king and there are subjects, and the subjects are not him. Now, when we look at the world, it's perfect. The world is not God. The world, with all of its billions of inhabitants, is not Hashem. And therefore, it's perfect. Hashem had to create something other than himself to make the world. Problem is that when Avram Avinu recognized Hashem, the pasuk says, "Vayikra Sham b'Shem Hashem." Avram called out in the name of God, And Avram taught something. Avram said, Kel Olam, God of the world. But Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the Alter Rebbe in Parshas Kisava in Likutei Torah, says, hold it. There's a letter missing. It should say Kel Ha'olam, the king of the world. There is a world, and God is the king of the world. He created it. In the words of the Rambam, the Eibishter is Matsui Rishon, Leida Sheyesham Matsui Rishon. We should know that there is a primordial being, a first existence, Mamtzi Kol Nimtza, and he's the one who brings forth all of creation, all of existence, perpetually. And all of existence, everybody that exists in heaven, meaning spiritual beings and earthly beings, and everything that's between heaven and earth, they exist from Hashem's existence. And then the Rambam says later, he says, Hamatzi Hazeh, this being, who, Elekaya Olam, he is the God of the world, Adoin Kol Haaretz, he's the master over all of creation. So Hashem is the king over the world. But Avram Avinu said, Kel Olam, God world. And the Alter Rebbe, Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi, has this brilliant insight in that omission of one hay. It's not an insight that comes from being smart. It's an intuitive insight. It's an insight of being in touch with what really exists, being a tzaddik and sensing reality on a whole different plane. The Alter Rebbe says, you know why Avram Avinu doesn't say the king of the world? Because in truth, the world is nothing other than God. Kel Olam, God world. God is the world. The world is Hashem. Nothing other than Him. Based on the teaching, and based on how do we get to that? We get to that simply. First of all, the main premise is that God did not go to a junkyard or what Rabbi Taub was talking yesterday about a scrap, what is it called? A scrap yard to pick up materials to create the world. Before Hashem created the world, the only material that existed is Himself. And when He created the world of Himself, or something from nothing. That means He's the entire oomph, the entire beingness of creation is Him. Or as we say, He is making us what's the stuff of our existence? Himself. His power, His energy. So what are we really? Only Him. Or maybe we can argue, no, he amputated, so to speak, a power of Himself, separated, and that's separated. So let's take it to the next teaching. The Baal Shem Tov, again, as we get closer to Mashiach, the world starts becoming aware of deeper truths. So the Baal Shem Tov, who is the founder of Hasidism, brings us to the awareness and the understanding that creation was not a one-time event, that Hashem took His energy and created a world, but rather that creation continues every second. That the Dvar Hashem, the words of God, to create the world, is constantly creating and recreating the world, Maayon lash, from nothing to something every second. That means that the creation is dependent on God so much that even for a split second Hashem pulls out, there is no creation. Why? Because Hashem is not 90% of the creation. He's not 99.9% of the creation. He is 100% of every being and every existence. And therefore, He has to continuously imbue them with beingness every second. So says the Baal Shem Tov. And the Rebbe says that we can see that in Rambam too. Let's take a look, even though this is a Chassidic idea. Look at Rambam, right in the beginning of Rambam, when Rambam describes creation. Rambam says, Yesoida is the foundation of all foundations. V'amuda chachma, and the pillar of all wisdom. Leida is to know, sheyesham matzui rishon, there is a primordial being. Hear these words. V'hu mamtzi kol nimtza, and He brings into being every creation. The Rambam doesn't say v'hu hoitzi, He brought existence into existence when Hashem created. It wasn't an act of the past. It's a continuum creation that's taking place. If the creation is continuously being beinged into existence every second by God, then what is creation truly? Nothing other than an expression of Hashem. Now, Hashem could, however, not allow this experience to be felt within us, because if this would happen, gone is His whole dream of being, for creating and bringing us into existence, because His whole purpose of it is to be a king. So to be a king, we have to be separated from Him. And therefore, Hashem creates the world through a filter. Hashem creates the world through a powerful screen. And that screen disconnects the creation from the Creator in their consciousness. But not in truth. From God's perspective, the creation is nothing other than one flow of his being, of his energy. But from the creation's perspective, we feel ourselves as something other than him. And actually in the Chassidus it says that there are different levels of existence. On the highest level of existence, in the world of what we call Atzilus, there's 4 levels of creation, Atzilus, Bri, Yetzir, and Asiya. So in the world of Atzilus, the world of emanation, that's the experience. Even though there are features in that world, and all the features that exist down here have to already exist in that original blueprint, so to speak, of all of creation. That's the world of Atzilus. That's the original form of all beings. Yet in that state, the consciousness is that there's only God. And that's why Atzilus is in a state of Ein Od Milvado, there's nothing but Hashem. Everything that exists over there is Hashem expressing himself in that feature. Let's say if there is a tree in Atzilus, the tree is nothing other than Hashem being a tree. That's the consciousness, and so forth. But then then Hashem creates a barrier, a filter, a screen, and he emanates the next stage of creation, which is called Olam Habriya. Even though it's a celestial world with very, very, very sublime creatures and beings, souls and very, very high malachim, yet they are already a part of Hashem. They're separated. And therefore they have already free will in a minute level away, but they have free will. Because they have a choice to obey or not obey. Kingship is already possible in that realm. But being that God is still so present, and so they still recognize that Hashem created them, even though they still have a sense of separation, Hashem's true desire of being a king is not fulfilled. So Hashem continues the creation by putting more and more and more barriers and filters and screen, each one adding to the sense of separateness and autonomy that the creation feels, until we reach the physical creation, which to think about God and to feel God takes effort. So disconnected we are, and we can wake up every morning and choose to go daven or not to go daven, to learn or not to learn, to be selfish or to serve your Creator. And this is where God gets his pleasure, when each and every one of us decide to bend our own sense of self for Hashem's will. That gives God the deepest pleasure and deepest thrill and justifies all of creation. And that's the idea of Malchus. Now, in that setting of Malchus, Hashem gave us Torah and mitzvahs. The whole idea of mitzvahs is, what's the definition of a mitzvah? A mitzvah means a commandment. And what's a commandment? That there are 2 beings. There is the commander and the commandee. And the commander is commanding the commandee to do the mitzvah. And the commandee has the option to obey or to disobey. And that's where the entire spiel, if we can call it, of Torah and mitzvahs plays itself out, is in that world of separation. Now, the question over here is this, and when does it reach its ultimate? When is it going to reach? Now we have observance, and the Eibishter has been getting nachas from his creation. But as we spoke in the earlier classes, we have to see Judaism and the project that God has, not just in the context of my own personal life, but we have to see it global. Because ultimately, God's dream was to be a king over the entire world. That state, because Hashem created the world with a lot of klipa, or we can say, he created the world with the potential for klipa. Klipa means forces that conceal and block and deny God. And as a result of the choices the early generations made, including beginning with Adam and Chava, it brought about a greater disconnect from the creation and an increase of klipa, to the point where the world almost completely severed its connection from God. Was saved at the last minute by one person, Avram Avinu, who kind of reconnected, who opened up the channel, brought the Jewish people to a recognition of Hashem. And we were just one small nation standing at a mountain accepting the Eibishter's kingship upon us, but ultimately we were going to purify and rectify and cleanse and bring a sensitivity to all of humanity. And that's what we do as a result of 3,500 years of Torah and mitzvahs throughout the entire world. We get rid of the klipa and enable people and the world to become more conscious of the Creator. Not conscious of the Creator to the point that they don't exist, but conscious of the Creator is that they reach a point that they want to serve Him. Obviously, we reach that ultimate expression with Moshiach Tzidkenu. When Mashiach comes, He is going to reign in all of creation by making all of mankind aware, first with the Jewish people. But once we have a Beis HaMikdash, it's going to increase a sense of the divine in the entire world, and all the billions of people, whether the millions of Chinese and from India and from in the Americas and in Europe, in the entire world, including the world, the entire world is V'haya Hashem lamelech al kol haaretz. God is going to be a king over the whole world, and everybody is going to serve Him. But the one thing that remains is that the creation still is a creation, and that's necessary because that's where the Eibishter finally has His ultimate fulfillment, where He is sitting on His great throne, and He's expressing, as we spoke, His kingship through Mashiach Tzidkenu, and that's how all of mankind and all of the world is serving Him. So He is a king over the entire world. But here is the idea. Once we achieve and accomplish that level of service to Hashem, then the desire of Hashem being a king over the world has finally reached its fulfillment. It's time to move into the next stage. And what happens is exactly how long, I don't know, but there is a process in which complete observance of the Jewish people of all of the mitzvahs adds a next level of purification and refinement and sensitivity, where at a certain point this barrier that blocks and conceals and disconnects the Creator from the creation, that the creation feels itself as a creation, and therefore finite, fixed, and divine, will suddenly melt away in the powerful light of divine observance. The powerful light of holiness will slowly start dissolving that great, great barrier. It becomes less and less and less until at a certain point it disappears. And then what happens? All of creation suddenly is now experiencing itself as a continuous flow of godly energy. And then what happens? The fixed rigidity of nature of every creature, even though it's Hashem expressing Himself in that way, but once you realize it's not me that I am, this is the rules of my being, it's just because God decided to express Himself this way. It's very easy one day that it decides to move a little bit different and stretch itself in another angle, because it's ultimately the singular essence of God that is not defined by anything. And suddenly you're open, the world is now open to unbelievable miracles. So the fact that Tchias HaMesim is going to happen, and the dead are going to come alive, and as we spoke earlier, that all the trees are going to bear fruit, even the barren trees, is really a derivative and a result of this higher consciousness that will kick in. And then what's going to happen with mitzvah observance? Is there no mitzvahs? Yes, there is no mitzvahs. That's why Chazal say, mitzvahs b'teilos la'asid lavai, that mitzvahs are batal. But here's the most amazing thing. How can a mitzvah be batal? How can the mitzvah stop? It says one of the 13 principles are that Zos HaTorah loy tehei machlefes, that Shabbos is not something that's here only for a certain purpose, for a means to an end. Shabbos is Hashem Himself. Hashem is Shabbos. Hashem is Tefillin. Hashem is, these are all things that just like God is eternal, His Torah is eternal. How are the mitzvahs going to stop one day? It flies, and the sages say mitzvahs are going to stop. Rambam insists in one of the 13 principles of faith that these mitzvahs cannot stop. And we once discussed this. The reason they can't stop is because if something is here for a means to an end, so once you reach the goal, you don't need them. You know, you have a contractor at your house building a house. He's there for 2 years. He's building and building. But once the house is finished, you don't need him. Goodbye. A shadchan is there. You don't want the shadchan to remain in the you have to bring about a certain thing. Now go home, and the couple will live happily ever after. If Torah is here just as a shadchan to accomplish something, but then it's not needed anymore, so the Torah is gone. But we say, no, Torah is essential, something of God, something of Hashem's essence. And the answer is, We will always wear tefillin. We will always keep Shabbos. We will always light Shabbos candles. We will always have two challahs on our table. We will always have a shofar. But the most magnificent thing is when Mashiach comes, we won't have a commandment to blow shofar. Shofar will be the natural expression, because when Rosh Hashanah comes, a shofar blows. Why? Because that's what God does, and we are one with Him. So therefore we blow shofar. That's why we put on tefillin. We do all these things because these are absolute truths, and that's our natural existence. There's no more element of commander and commandment, and therefore there's no possibility anymore of disobeying, because the world is now completely fused and attached to the Eibishter. See, in the times of Mashiach, even though in the first era, going back, the first era, when we're still in the consciousness of separation, when we're still in the state of Hashem is, He created a world, and we're still separated from Him, even though technically it will be very, very unlikely to sin, very, very unlikely to sin, because because God will be a king over the whole world, but it doesn't mean it's not possible to sin. There is a pasuk in Yeshaya Navi, where the pasuk says that hachoite. Let me give the lashon over here. It says hachoite, someone who sins, ben meya shana yamus, he will die when he's 100 years old. That means that there will be possibility. Obviously, it probably doesn't mean a very coarse sin, but there is the possibility of sin even after Mashiach comes. Why? As long as you have, or I have, or anybody has, an independence, a sense of beingness other than God, there is that choice, listen or not listen. Well, can angels sin? Very, very, very unlikely for angels to sin. Yet the Gemara says that one of the big angels, Matatrain, talking about one of the biggest angels, was one day taken out and given 60 lashes with a fiery whip because of something that is considered sin to the Malach. Why? Because even angels, even Malachim, live in a state of apartness from Hashem. So it's possible to sin. There's another pasuk in Yecheskel. In Yecheskel it says that when Mashiach will come, the Har Habayis is going to be, the Temple Mount is going to be much larger than it was in the previous times, so that the sinfulness that's going on in the streets of, in the homes of Jerusalem should not bring tumah to the Beis HaMikdash. So there should be a big separation between the sins that are happening in the homes, like Rashi explains that in the pasuk, that if people are sinning in the homes, you want to create a big barrier. It shouldn't chas v'shalom be in a very close. It shouldn't impart impurity onto the temple. Obviously, we can understand we're probably not talking about the types of sins that we can imagine. We're probably talking about very, very, very edel, little, very, 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 we might say an elegant sin, if we can say on a sin that it's elegant, but a very, very fine miss whatever. But yet, even those little things are still considered sin, and that can impact the Beis HaMikdash. So you see, it's possible. But after Mashiach comes, we will intrinsically observe all the commandments. And halacha will be natural to us. And how much will halacha be natural to us? How deep will it be? Well, the Medrash says in Tehillim, it's a Medrash Yalkut Tehillim. It says when Mashiach comes, and as the Rebbe explains, we're talking about the second stage of Mashiach. When a person will want to pick a fig on Shabbos, as he's going to approach the fig tree, the fig tree will cry out, and it will say Shabbos Hayom, that it is Shabbos today. Don't pick me. Obviously, we have to say that it's really hypothetical, because if the fig tree is naturally in tune with Shabbos, then hopefully the picker of the fig is also in that state. So obviously what the Medrash is meaning is hypothetically, if there would be such a thing that someone wants to pick a fig on Shabbos, the tree will automatically say to him, it's Shabbos today. Now what does it mean the tree will talk? It doesn't mean with a voice. It means that the tree, the creation, will so obviously cry out that there's a creator, that we will see God's truth in all of creation, and the fact that it's Shabbos is not a day for picking fruit, so that will be so evident and so powerfully expressed in the very, very physical element of the tree. It's that the tree is calling out. So really, what's the biggest miracle that's going to happen in that stage, in Moshiach stage? The biggest miracle is this transformation, this higher consciousness, this higher reality. So is it going to be a different world? As I said earlier, certain things might be tweaked, but it's the same world. It's still the same world that we have, but it's a completely different world. It's a Shamayim HaChadoshim. It's a new heaven. It's a new earth. But why is it a new heaven and a new earth? Asher ani oiseh, that you will see that I am making it. Now we don't see in heaven and in earth that heaven and earth is an expression of God making it. Now we live in the consciousness of Keil Ha'olam. God is the king over the world. And that's really the mitzvah. The mitzvah that we have to know Hashem these days. What's our mitzvah? Everybody has a mitzvah to know Hashem, is that you have to know God as the supreme being who created the world, who's the ruler over the world. We're not obligated now to have the deeper knowledge in terms of a mitzvah and a chiyuv, because that's not the condition of what the world is today. When Moshiach will come, our mitzvah of Yediyas Hashem will increase, but it won't be a mitzvah anymore. It will be the natural awareness and understanding that God is and everything is only Him. That will be the state. That's why the Alter Rebbe says in Likutei Torah, Shneur Zalman of the Yadi, in Bamidbar, hear these words. He says that really, when Hashem gave the Torah, when we stood at Har Sinai, we had really a Mashiach moment. It was like a Kodak moment. It was like a moment of the future. We had Moshiach then. And when we heard the Aseret Adibris, we heard them differently. We didn't hear the 10 Commandments as commandments. We heard the 10 Commandments as a state of reality. The Alter Rebbe says that the word Lo Tirtzach, you should not commit murder, or Lo Tignov, you should not steal, and something, is not really, it can be heard as a commandment, or it can be heard as what will be. Hashem says, Lo tirtzach, humanity will not murder. You will not kill. Lo tignov, you will not steal. In other words, we will reach, the Torah is telling us how the world will be. It will be in a state where no one will be able to steal. No one will be able to commit any of these crimes, because we are going to be completely godly. We are going to be as Hashem is in that godly state. He says that's the way we heard it at Har Sinai. We actually didn't hear it as commandments. We heard it as just reality. But then he says, "Inyan lo tirtzach." Oh, hold on over here. No. V'inei b'shas matan Torah. This is in Likutei Torah on Daf Yud Gimel Bamidbar. B'shas matan Torah hadibur ba'atzmoi goizer. The commandment itself decreed. Oimer lo tirtzach. But what does it mean? B'loshen asid. It means in the future. Shaloi tia b'chinezu niras ba'olam. This element of murdering someone will not be existence in the world. Ki ha'asid v'hatzivui shneim mishamshem b'loshen echad. The future and the commandment are both use the same word. Aval achar achet. This is the way it was till the egel. But once they sinned by making the golden calf, so now, now it's now changed. Now the mitzvahs are more commanding. And Hashem, of course, the Chet Egel is a continuation of the Chet of the Eitz Hadas. Even though we say we could have avoided it, but it needed not to be avoided, because we needed to purify the creation from the bottom up in a way where we are first apart, separated for thousands of years. We obey the commandments because God commanded us to do so, with what we call Kabbalah's Oil Malchus Shamayim, the acceptance of the yoke of heaven. We reach the climax of that acceptance of the yoke of heaven after thousands of years when Moshiach comes, and he brings the entire world, first the entire Jewish people, but then the entire world into compliance with God's will, and in a manner where all of the entire world senses in a very powerful way God's sovereignty and God's kingship. But as we continue doing mitzvahs, and as a result of that bringing more and more and more revelation of Hashem into the world, we enter into a higher truth. And that higher truth is what we're going to discuss in the next class, is really called God has a home in this world. See, until this point, Hashem is not at home in this world. Hashem is in heaven, and he's a king over the world. That's the idea. And even though the truth is that he's always here, but he's not recognized as him being in this world, Hashem is a melech, and the world is something separated from him. But it's that we say that God desired, the deeper desire is not to be a king. The deeper desire is Nis'ava HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Eibishter had a taiva, he had a burning desire to have a home in this world. Once God moves in, which means that we have the capacity and the purification to be able to feel how the essence of, how all of existence is emanating from the essence of God, and it's nothing but him, then the world becomes innately godly, holy, and completely in sync with Eibishter. And that's why we live forever. And that's why there is no death, because we are him and he is us, even though we're physical. But the physical is just the ultimate expression of God's omnipotent power to be physical, as will be discussed by Hashem in the next class. So this is the idea. Now this also will explain to us one more idea, in which the fifth Chabad Rebbe, the Rebbe Rashab, explains that the idea that mitzvahs are batal when Mashiach comes. He adds one more idea, very, very powerful. And the Rebbe Rashab says that the difference between the mitzvahs now and the mitzvahs when Mashiach comes is now we experience God's ratzon, Hashem's desire. What are the mitzvahs? The mitzvahs is ritzaynai shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the will of God. That's what's visible. That's what we sense in a mitzvah, that Hashem wants me to do the mitzvah. When Mashiach will come, and in that second stage that we're talking about, we will access something deeper. Not Hashem's desire to do the mitzvah, but Hashem's pleasure in the mitzvah. The godly pleasure and delight. I mean, we do all these things, and we say, well, what in the world do we have to do these weird stuff? It's like really, really weird. What kind of, because we don't know the pleasure that Hashem has in these things and why this is pleasurable to him. And the reason why we are living in a world of Hashem's desire, not in, as we relate to mitzvah as to Hashem's mitzvah as Hashem's desire, not as Hashem's oineg, is because it's simple. When you have a master and servants, the master reveals to his servants what he wants. He doesn't reveal to his servants what his pleasure in that, because pleasure is very personal. It's his pleasure. It's not their business. They're his subjects or his servants. They need to know what he wants so that they can do what he asked of them to do. And that's as long as we are his subjects. Once Mashiach comes, we cease to be his subjects. We are just him, an expression of him. In that state, once we're him, then we can feel his pleasure, because the pleasure is something that you feel only within you. That's you. You can describe your pleasure maybe to someone else, but it's still not, they can't feel your pleasure. That's not possible. You can't feel someone's pleasure. They can maybe appreciate it and have a similar pleasure. Now here's the amazing thing. Imagine doing a mitzvah, putting on the tefillin, fixing a mezuzah to the door, eating matzah, and experiencing God's pleasure in this. That's what we're talking about. Pleasure of the world to come. Pleasure of, it's being one with Hashem and experiencing, I can't even use the word infinite, because infinite doesn't capture it. The innermost essence of the Eibishter, of God, as we are one with him. And that's the observance of mitzvahs. May we merit to immediately to rush that the first stage. Shouldn't have to. The Rebbe actually said that being that the Golus is taking so long, it doesn't leave us much room for the first stage. That means that we move very, very quickly from the state of the full realization of the Eibishter's Malchus, and we move into Dira B'Tachtonim. Now you have to realize that Chassidus has already, 200 years ago, already sensed that second stage and started at least conceptually bringing us that level of unity with the Eibishter. And that's why the life of Chassidus is so much richer and pleasurable than an observance of mitzvahs without Chassidus, because it's that deeper inner identification with being a Jew. As Rabbi Taub spoke yesterday, not looking for a reward. There's no great, we don't care about a reward. We just care about to do the mitzvah. Now it's more like because that's what Hashem wants. So there's no greater pleasure to do what Hashem wants. But eventually it will be, if Hashem wants that, then I want that, because me and Hashem are just absolutely one. May we merit to see that now and now and now. Yeah. Yecheskel says that when Mashiach will come, the Harabayas will be bigger, will be larger, so that there will be a greater barrier or a greater separation between the homes of the people living in Yerushalayim to the Beis HaMikdash. There will be a change in when Mashiach comes, there will be actually a physical change in Yerushalayim. And there will be, it discusses some kind of the mountain will rise and so on and so forth. And there will be and that will create a buffer zone. So that if Chas v'Shalom people are sinning, it's not next door to the Beis HaMikdash. If you think about it, the Kosel HaMaravi, right over the other right side, it's not far. It's very, very close. So there will be a greater space. So the reason I brought that is to show that in the first state of Moshiach, it's possible still for sins to happen, because as long as we're living in the first level of consciousness as a creation, it's, even though it's very unlikely that someone should do an Avera, it is a possibility. But once we're living in the second stage, it's not possible anymore. That's the idea. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, but completely evil will only be eradicated in that second phase. Yes, there's still the inyan of Sitra Achra still exists. You see that in Tanya in his letters in the back. Even after Mashiach comes, there is still Sitra Achra existing in the world. It's very, very much outside of us, but it's similar. You know what it is? It's probably similar to the way Sitra Achra and snake and all that existed to Adam Arishon. And Chava, it was like an outside being, but it was still there. So as we progress, we in the first stage of Mashiach, we perhaps are close to Adam Arishon before the sin. After Mashiach, after the second stage, we finally reached where Adam and Chava were supposed to reach. As a result of their Torah mitzvahs in Gan Eden, they were supposed to reach that second stage. But they decided to go down before they went up, so that eventually, through the down, our going up and our union will be so much deeper and so much greater. Yes? We don't know. As I said, there's no set phrase for that. And the Rebbe actually said that it's possible that we go directly into the second stage. In other words, once we have the moment of his galus of Mashiach, it's possible that this higher consciousness will immediately kick in. It's also possible that it will be different by people. It doesn't have to be that it will be immediately for everybody. It's also possible that it will, it'll consciously evolve. It's a certain oh wow, and that awareness is yeah. Yes. That's why we say it. There is no explanation. That's why we say it's a taiva. That's why we say it's a taiva. A taiva is like the Alter Rebbe said. On a taiva, you can't ask a question. When someone has a desire, a pleasurable longing for something, it's just because this is in that category of beyond explanation, beyond reason. I mean, we understand the novelty of it, that the lowest and coarsest becomes so connected. But the truth is, why did he need that? Did he need that? But yet he did. Yes, and the lowest is the place. Earth, the physical is the lowest. The physical existence is the lowest. It's all part. All those planets are all part of the support system. It's all part of the, yeah. And as they say today, you can see already. Today they say, even the biggest scientists, that, that in order for life to go on Earth the way it is now, it requires that entire outer space with everything that's there. The whole Earth has to be that way. So, why planet Earth is Earth? Or you can say, like, why didn't Hashem create the world a little more to the west? He created it here, so this is it. So Earth is, and the rest is part of Earth. It's all part of that, a system, and where this can happen. But the other question of why Earth, in terms of why not a different spiritual dimension, the answer is that he desired it to be in the lowest place. Yes. Yeah, so it's, obviously to him there is no must. He could have done it, yeah, but this is the way he chose it to be, and yes, in this design. Yeah, that it does do it, yeah. Yeah, and when the toes are not doing it, then we do get pleasure afterwards when they do, yes. Yes. Yeah. Is it God's masculinity that he wants to be a king? Ultimately, that's right. Yeah. So the question is that initial desire more of an outward, element, or is it more of an inward thing? Yeah, but you're dealing with levels before Chachma and Bina. Yeah. It's something I need to think of, and I hear you. Yeah. I'll see. Yeah. Bezos Hashem.